CEO, newly added title, of Silence and Shame, and it is a real pleasure and honor to be here. I want to thank Natasha for orchestrating this wonderful initiative. Thank you, Natasha, who's in the back, and thank you again, Andrea. It's always a pleasure. I'm an Atlanta native, and so to be able to partner with the Atlanta Hawks is a really big deal. So this is our second time doing this community conversation. I'll get right into introductions. To my far left, I have Dr. Vaughn, who has been a friend of the organization, 4 years now, 5 years, right when we first started. And so he has his own practice here in Atlanta. Used to be the director of counseling services for the Morehouse School of Medicine, but he is just a really knowledgeable young man and has an incredible practice and is definitely out here saving lives. So y'all give it up for Vaughn. To my left, we have Garrison Hurst, who is a former NFL great and two-time Pro Bowler. He's played for a number of teams. You can Google him. He is a man. But what I am most impressed about him is he is extremely humble in terms of all he has accomplished, and for him to give up his time on a Sunday, and he has family and can be doing so much more, but we're really grateful to have him. So y'all give it up for Garrison. To my right, your left, is former NBA player and SEC star, Jumaine Jones, who also does a lot nowadays around mental health in the community. You can catch him in various cities. He's between here and Philadelphia, and a good friend of ours who works for Black Men Heal connected us. So he came all the way in from Philly, y'all. So y'all give it up for Jumaine. And lastly, to my right and your left is Andrea Carter, who actually I think I can call friend now, as well as colleague, and she is the vice president for the Atlanta Hawks Corporate Social Responsibility, and she does so much for the community. It's really an understatement, and she has really been just our cheerleader, one of our biggest cheerleaders in the organization, and allowing us to collaborate and do so much work. We also have another partnership that we're doing, and we just released some content on March 9th for a 20-minute conversation that I curated and moderated with Trey Young, who we know is the star player for the Atlanta Hawks, and singer and actress Chloe Bailey. And in May, we're going to be doing the second part of that teen wellness initiative, and we're doing a COPE clinic for 100 of our teens. So we really are in the community trying to give back. And again, we just want to thank the Atlanta Hawks and thank Andrea. All right, so now I'm just going to read a little blurb, and then we'll get into our questions for the day. And then probably the last 15 minutes of the session, we're going to open it up for Q&A. Because it is a community conversation, so you guys listen, and if you have any burning questions for our athletes or for our clinician, fire away, or myself or Andrea. So I want to read a statement taken from Hackensack Meridian Health. As soon as Simone Biles announced her withdrawal, she was met with criticism, and that's what athletes fear most, that they'll be seen as weak or a quitter by their coaches or teammates. It's as if their mental health isn't important as their physical health, Dr. King adds. They might not feel they have a say over their own body, or that it even matters. Simone stated she was surprised when people actually came out in support of her. So I'd like to start with you first, Jumaine. Describe the compounding pressure that athletes are under to take care of their mental health while also performing in their respective sports.
Well, I'm going to speak on being an NBA player. It's only 450 of us every year in the world, and it's 1% chance you're going to make the NBA. So it's extremely hard to be able to go out each and every night and perform. As you all know, some days you don't feel like getting up. Some days you don't feel like going to work. But people look at us like superheroes. Some days we don't want to be superheroes. So just that alone is tough to be able to go out and knowing at the same time, it's only 450 of you in the world. So to go in every single day, no matter what's going on at home, you got to be able to perform and be able to maintain your job. So that alone makes it really, really tough in my field.
You want to add anything to that, Garrison?
Yeah, as far as NBA said 450 players, NFL a lot more, but looking back in my career, I can remember a 6-week period where there was a different guy beside me every day because they cut him. You cut something different every day. And just the mental aspect of thinking that every day, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Am I going to have a job tomorrow? That may have been some of the easier things you have to deal with the NFL. Not so much worried about the playing, but worried about, am I going to actually be here tomorrow, or are they going to bring somebody else?
Hey Shanti, can I?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I remember one year, this was a few years ago, when we had a previous general manager, they had a committee, and it was a player committee, and we would get together and talk about various aspects related to that particular player. So for me, it might be community, for somebody else, it might be what is happening at home in the family life, for someone else, it is physically what's happening. I was in a meeting one time, and somebody said, well, he's not remembering the plays. Might we need to test him for something? So, there's so much that goes in. It was the first time it made me think about the player as a whole person, where you had these conversations around how can we support them to be their best selves. And I'm not sitting at home going, gosh, I wonder if he has ADD and that's why he can't perform, right? You're like, shoot the ball. So I'm just thinking in terms of mental wellness, it is all of those things together. So hopefully athletes have that holistic support around them, whether it's at the team or at home with their wives, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely, thank you for adding that. So now I'd like to go to our clinician on the panel, Vaughn, Dr. Vaughn Gay. What do you feel is missing in the sports industry to better advocate for the mental health of these players, really coming off of what Andrea just said?
So I think that we're creating a new framework right now. We're trying to blend the physical health and the mental health of all of our athletes, not only the athletes, but the coaches, support staff, etc. I think the first thing, the mentality of professional sports is you have to play hurt, right? You have to play physically hurt. So if you have a finger that's broken, put it back in place. If you have any type of lingering pain, you shoot some Toradol, I think that's what it's called, and then you kind of just keep it moving. So if the expectation is to play hurt physically, then if you have something going on mentally within your life, it's kind of hard to measure the value of taking yourself out of the game because you may be experiencing some depression or some anxiety. So now it's an internal battle. Do you really bring to the forefront a true mental issue or emotional issue that you've been having, and it remove you from the game, and you may actually be replaced. That may have
Let me add to that. How many
consequences.
times have we seen a player in football and they say, oh, their wife passed away or their dad, and you see them score a touchdown and they look up, but they're still going through grief. They're
Absolutely.
out on the field. That's a lot.
There was a game, Brett Favre was a famous Monday Night Football game. Brett Favre, I think he played against the Raiders when he was with Green Bay, and his father just passed. And I think that he scored 4 or 5 touchdowns in that first half. It was cathartic for him to be out there on the field and play, but he was dealing with losing a close family member, his father, right? So all the different thoughts and feelings that was going through his mind in that time had to have a huge impact on him. For him, that actually worked. For some athletes, they may not be able to get out to that space. So what's missing, I think it's just a continual true understanding of these athletes are human beings first, right? We all are. And so if we have that mentality of you have to play when you're hurt, that also means we're going to play when we're dealing with multiple mental health issues. So I think it's more or less continual conversations, having an understanding of these men, and them being able to perform at that high level. We must address certain emotional and mental issues.
Thank you, Dr. Gay. Garrison, I want to go to you next. Based on your experience in many years in the NFL, I want to ask you the same question. How can teammates support one another through mental health challenges? Because, it's got to be tough in the locker room, right? I know y'all have the camaraderie and you support one another, but, when you do have all these personal issues going on, and if you see someone kind of, not necessarily unraveling, but they're not really performing at their highest level, they're kind of quiet in the locker room and not really talking to guys after the practice. What can you all do, or how can you better support one another? Or even just to the guys that are playing now?
I'm thinking back on stories, or not so much stories, but things that I went through in the locker room. One thing you have to remember that everybody going from elementary to middle school, to high school, to college, the one thing that all coaches stress, be physically tough. No one ever said, I need you to be just as mentally tough on it. They want you to be mentally sharp on your plays and what you do and when to do it. But as far as being physically tough, that was the one thing. So it was always looked down upon early in my career if you were, if you went to a coach or a player personnel and said, listen, I need some time mentally to get away from this. Like I said earlier, someone else is going to be playing running back the next game.
Right.
So I noticed middle to end of my career, NFL started making strides on protecting people more as far as the concussion side of things, and making sure guys were recovering and getting the help they need to get back on the field. I think lately, I guess past 10 to 15 years, they're also now working on trying to help the guys after the concussion syndrome. Because I can't remember how many concussions I've had, but I had a concussion every game I played.
Are you serious?
Only every game I played. But that's how football was when I played. You didn't lead with your shoulder, you lead with your head. So I hit
Rules have
somebody.
changed a lot.
If I didn't feel a little dizzy when I hit somebody, I didn't get him good. That was football. But now we know what it has done to us. So
And the effects of the brain.
yes, that's a whole other story. White brain matter and so on.
Right.
I think back on the stories where there were guys in the locker room, man, some guys, hey man, pick it up, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Then I started noticing where I was looking at the 49ers where we had owners that cared about us enough that we had mental health people in our locker room walking around. And you would see guys walk away and speak with someone around the corner, and we started having camaraderie nights as players.
Really?
Yes, we would actually talk. And a lot of times you can open guys up by game of pool. Let's go home, let's go to the media and play some video games. And I can say we probably saved some guys from doing some things, and we still probably lost some guys. But the conversation of it is, like he said earlier, like Doc said earlier, it is a start, and it's still a learning process.
That's right. I love that because, my executive director and my entire team, they're here. I'll introduce them at the end. But we talk a lot about trying to meet people where they're at, right? So I love the fact that, you got the guys together. That's why I like barbershop talk, right? Or hair salon talk is so important because I know sometimes I use my hairstylist as a therapist, even though I know she's not licensed, but it allows me to open up and talk and share. So I love that you all.
She should be licensed, we have the same hairdresser.
Yes, but she is fabulous. I'd like to ask you that same question, Jumaine, as it relates to your experience in the NBA.
Well, my experience was a lot different. I spoke about this 12 people suit up, on basketball court. It was only 12. So it's more competitive. Guys are not really into, seeing how you're doing. They're just like the coaches and the teams. They just want to see you perform. Now that I'm in a space and I see what's going on, the suggestion that I can give is, I think it's a bigger deal for organizations to reach out and meet players where they are, and not using like the NBA, somebody outside the NBA, because
Sounds a shame. That's why we're here.
Let's just say that you're working a Fortune 500 company job, and somebody comes up, and you want to talk to them about what's going on in your personal life. And the NBA guys are looking at that like, fuel, for the ownership. They can use that. Like, okay, well, he's having a problem with this. Now it's time to negotiate a contract.
Right.
You know what I mean? So for me, I think it's just more, and guys will be more susceptible of, opening up more if we bring in organizations like yours and mine to be able to come in where people can actually open up and feel good about, just giving these guys a safe space. Most athletes don't feel good when it's in-house. I think if we reach out outside to other organizations, multiple organizations, because everybody needs something different. Everybody don't need the same thing. So, my thing is to get organizations to be able to meet players where they are and bring in other organizations other than the NBA.
I love that. And initially, we were trying to include a music artist on the panel because, we do a lot of work with Silence and Shame around sports and entertainment. And my background is in the music industry. I actually started at LaFace Records. Tell my age, y'all call me Auntie Shanti. Back in 1991. Actually, I started at Capitol Records back in 1991. LaFace in 93. The first record I ever worked was Outkast, Players Ball. And there are a lot of similarities between athletes and entertainers. And back then, we definitely didn't talk about it, just like the leagues didn't really talk about mental health. But I see now a lot of labels, record labels, are also reaching out into the community, trying to find outside organizations and partners to be able to help because they just don't have that right? And it's just not there. And I know a lot of teams are doing a better job of having, sports counselors. And I know we have people dealing with the mental toughness, but now someone like Dr. Gay really coming in. So I think that's extremely important. So thank you for that, Jumaine. Andrea, I want to ask you the next question. How does the Hawks organization prioritize and support the mental health of its players and employees? That's kind of right along the lines of what we just spoke about.
Yeah, so the good news is that in recent years there have been a lot of players that have been vocal about mental health challenges and wellness. And so now at the league, and hopefully you'll be happy to hear this, so there's the Mind Health program that they've established, and every team has to have a therapist or a psychiatrist that is available for players. And so we have a team psychologist, Dr. Gunter, that is available for players, whether that's before practice, after practice. They have those private conversations that the team is not privy to, but it is mandated that you're supposed to have someone so that they can do that. Certainly during COVID, there were virtual opportunities as well when folks weren't in person. And so it is something that's really important for our players. Trey Young talks a lot about mental wellness. He has a saying, another day, another opportunity. He works with his family. His father says all the time, I try to keep him off of social media as much as possible because everything there is in front, they're going to talk about you and bring you down. And so I'd say our organization places a high priority on it for our players and then also for our staff and certainly for the community. So we have courageous conversations around mental wellness. We had Shanti maybe 3 years ago come and speak to our staff, and she came with a psychologist to talk to the staff, and then we have other courageous conversations around mental wellness. So making sure we're doing it on the business side as well as with our players.
Awesome. Glad to see more of that. And I see that the league, I was just at NBA All-Star Weekend, got to talk to some folks who actually work in the front office. And so I'm glad to see that as a league overall, that mental health and wellness is certainly a priority. I want to pivot to you, Dr. Vaughn, coming on the heels of this question. How important, though, sometimes is it for a player that still may be struggling to have their own personal therapist, right, outside of the access that they have to people that can help treat them within the organization?
Yeah, great question. So the NBA handles mental health differently than the Major League Baseball does. And Major League Baseball handles it differently from the NFL. Athletes have to understand that you have to take your own health into your hands at a certain point. I love that there's a shift going on to where we're not just having a sports psychologist on the team, right? Sports psychologists can talk about performance-based issues, maybe some anxiety on the field, etc. But you have, like when Brandon Marshall had the issue with borderline personality disorder, right? And he was traded to 3 different teams, early in his career. Great athlete. Was having major issues with getting arrested nonstop, and the sports psychologist could not figure out what was going on with him personally. He went and sought outside care, and he just speaks about his psychologist nonstop and how that saved his life, because he did not just depend on the actual team to be able to get him well. You would think that an organization that's investing millions of dollars in you will invest in the complete individual, right? Make sure they're in a good place. But because you have so many athletes that are talented, that are willing to replace that player, and maybe not necessarily have to have those issues addressed, it puts teams sometimes in a little bit of a difficult place, right? So I encourage any athlete, any young person right now that has aspirations of going to professional sports, go ahead and develop a relationship with a practitioner right now, right? I tell high school students, want to be able to get recruited and go to college. Once you get in that college space, it really becomes about business. And so if we don't have those relationships in place, it can be very difficult for you to be able to navigate those waters once you're already in that sports organization. So, these kind of, we talk about it continuously. We speak on, hey, I speak with my therapist, I have an appointment next week. We bring this into the lexicon of our conversations, and it no longer becomes a hands-off approach, more hands-on.
That's right. Therapy for all. You get a therapist. You get a therapist. I'm joking, but I'm very serious. So this question is on the panel, but the spirit is moving me to ask it, because most of us that are in the room are African American, and this certainly has just been a really tough 2 years on our nation, right? On our college students, my niece Chloe, so junior at Kentucky, is in the building, and on athletes, right? And so I can't imagine what it's been like having to live and play through COVID. So many of these players were in bubbles, right? The NBA did the bubble very well, and the NFL had certainly a lot of protocols trying to keep you're safe. And then just being Black men in America. Let's just be honest about that, what that does to our mental psyche and the generational trauma that's been passed down from the days of slavery. How important is it as an African American male in the public eye, someone in sports, to take that time for themselves and to really hone in on their mental wellness and also be vulnerable, whether it is within the family? I'm not saying you got to share it with all the players, but that level of vulnerability now for Black men in America, I think, is so vitally important to our existence mentally and physically.
Well, I'm really, really big on self-care day. I think once a week, and people laugh at me and think I'm crazy. They're like, well, what do you do for self-care? And I tell them I take a road trip with no music for like 2-3 hours. And it just, gives me that space where, I can get my mind together and think about things that I need to get done, get my mental together. Just being a Black man, we already know how that works already. We're coming out of the womb, it's tough on us from day one. So, that alone, I think it just, with us, I work with organizations, you mentioned it earlier, Black Men Heal, and this organization actually gets together, and I think it's great for athletes to be able to have a camaraderie. Once a week, to be able to get with a bunch of guys, and actually speak and be open and transparent, and a lot of times that's tough to do in the space because of the stigma that they give us, as Black men who grew up as children. They tell us not to cry, you know what I mean? But me, I had to learn how to cry, how to be open, and how to be transparent, to be able to, make myself feel good, to be able to, and then I found out that I'm helping others doing that. And it's also healing for me to even have those kind of conversations. So in our community, I think the more that we can be open and transparent with each other, and try to get over the stigma, whatever that takes. Maybe he can speak more on it because I'm not a licensed professional, but I can talk about my experience.
Jumaine, I think, what you've been saying continuously all day is, that connectivity between the players, right? So no longer can we depend on the coaches and the higher ups in the organization to make that effort for us, right? You all are the talent. Without the talent, there is no team. There is no actual concept of sports. So I think the players really have to empower themselves, right? The same way resources are shared in terms of agents, right? Or someone that, is good with investments, or someone that's an auto dealer, right? We need to have that same network of mental health practitioners that can, assist someone that may be going through an issue with co-parenting or going through an issue with divorce, right? Real life things are still happening to athletes. And so I think that, those relationships that you all have with individuals like us, right, in the community, share those resources, connect folks, and then encourage your comrades to even, pursue those services. Not even just with current players, with the alumni players. Make sure you all having hands on those young guys, right? Not even just in the NBA and the NFL, but also out there at UGA, making sure that you're continuously being a conduit, right? For them to be able to get the services and the access that they need, because you've been through what they're going through. You know exactly what they're going to be dealing with, right? You can see some of yourself in them. And so I just think that by connecting them on the other side, right, with things that you all have going on in your lives right now, that's how, forgetting elevating the conversation, we're elevating the experience of the athlete, in terms of getting their mental health addressed. So I love what you're saying about the continuity, and also they do a really good job with that at UGA. They call them skull sessions, where the kids just sit down and they talk about everything but football, life, school, what's happening on the next level. That way that confidence is being bred. They have a level of security within themselves. I actually think that's what helped them win that national championship this year.
Hey, got the chip. I'm going to ask Garrison the next question. It's very similar to kind of like what we're talking about around self-care and wellness. What ways can players balance and incorporate both self-care and mental wellness? What advice would you give?
I think that's probably the smartest thing they can do as far as balancing both, because by balancing both, you're able to perform at a higher level. And I'm right now referring to guys that are still playing, of course, as we were saying earlier, we're not playing anymore, but now we really concentrate more on our mental health, because we've learned through our life that that's what we need. As he was saying earlier, I find myself crying for no reason. I have a daughter now, that makes me cry more than anything. But more than anything, I used to, you always told boys don't cry. And I found I need to cry some. So I'm like, I sit down, I had to let it out. So with that being said, that's one part that I was able to work with. And as far as the guys playing now, I'm sure they're still hearing things from other people, not sure what source. And some people hadn't wised up to the point that these guys need outlets. But I do believe that the generation now are a lot farther ahead of than we were. And with this panel here, now that you see, I think they're getting information they need, or in some way that's going to help them way sooner than we got there.
Yes, I love that. So we're coming up on our final question before we open up the floor for questions. And anyone can kind of jump in and respond to this one. 33% of all college students experience significant symptoms of depression, anxiety, or mental health conditions. Among that group, 30% seek help. But of college athletes with mental health conditions, we've seen only 10% seek help. What suggestions can you offer to younger athletes to combat these statistics? And I know you talked about the skull sessions. We can start back with you and then work through.
Young people, right? When you're in college, let's take the student athlete part of it. Being a college student, right? Transition from high school into your young adulthood is hard. It is extremely hard. It's where you make the most mistakes, the worst decisions, right? You don't have enough experience to be able to develop real healthy relationships. And so you add on the pressure of being someone that is playing in front of 50, 60, 70, this is college, 100,000 people every single day. Right, and then being able to see things on Twitter and YouTube, and it's stimulation overload, for these young people, right? They're gonna make mistakes, and I think what happens is when you were playing at a high level, those mistakes are exacerbated, right? And these are amateur athletes up until this past year, and so I think in terms of do not be afraid to ask for help. As a young person, one of the first things that you're taught in school, kindergarten, first grade, what have you have a question, ask for help. Right? Not sure where we got to the point in our lives and the trajectory where we stopped asking for help. But it's something that my son is saying. I teach him this all the time. Ask for help. You have healthy adults by building healthy children, right? In terms of those that are already in this space in college right now, the camaraderie amongst one another, supporting each other as opposed to tearing each other down, being the resource of being the safe person that person can go to, and then being able to connect them with resources. It's a multi-step approach that we have to make sure that we are supporting each other.
Well, it's funny, he said skull session. During COVID, we actually did skull session with the football players. They took time to reach out, and several players would link up with different players on the team. Of course, I did the running backs, fullbacks. I know those guys a little bit. But as he said, the conversation was never about football. At the time, we were going through a lot of Black Lives Matter movement. So it was important to let those guys say things what they were thinking on a platform where, because we not only have black and white, we have some white football players in this meeting with us. So they needed to hear what these black guys were thinking, and white guys needed to say so the black guys could hear as well. But with that being said, they also opened it up to life. It wasn't just about X and O's again. Now we took this thing to life, and I think that is a step first, because these kids got to understand that you have got to say something about how you feel inside, mentally, way more than physically.
That's right, absolutely. Jumaine, thank you.
Yes, I think that they make really key points. And my organization is called Beyond the Hardwood. So that's really big what you guys are talking about, because I kind of trick the kids and come into a basketball camp, and then we sit in and have those real conversations like you guys are having now. But I think with our college students and our younger youth, you got to be more open. The best teachers is experience. Be more open to be able to reach out to those who've done it. Reach out to, your coaches and all that kind of stuff. To be open to that, because a lot of times these kids don't even know they have issues. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times I go out and I speak and I have people coming up to me saying like, man, I think I got to reevaluate my life and really think about, I really need to go seek help.
And let me just say, adults too. Sometimes we don't think we had issues, but we need to get help too.
No, you're 100% right about that. And that's something I've been learning, to be honest with you. On my venture of reaching out to our youth, I've learned and reaching out to our youth, and they're still going home to broken homes. So that's another sector that I'm adding on to be able to help the parents, because a lot of them need help. They just don't know how to ask, so that's another sector of going to where the parents are employed.
Thank you. You want to add to that, Andrea?
Yeah, when I was a student athlete, clearly that I was not. I'm just going to lean into everything that they said. I think it's important if you can start having those conversations in that support system at a younger age. Laura, my line sister, her nephew was a running back in Georgia. But he got injured, and so he went to play for the Redskins, and he got injured, and so he was injured a lot. And so luckily, she's a licensed therapist, so she was able to have those conversations with him all throughout when he was in college as a student, just to kind of keep his mind in the game, if you will, and by that I mean the game of life. So I think as much as you can have that support system, I'm going to look up beyond the hardwood after this, because I'm impressed by the work that you're doing and with young people, and I love the thought too of using something as a hook to get them in. The program that we're doing with Silence the Shame is really about that as well. So they put together a program that's going to get to the young people around, they're going to be dancing and doing TikTok and have all these different stations. That's what they think they're coming here for, but what they're really going to get is the information that Jewel and Megan and Shanti are going to impart in them around mental wellness. And so that was a long-winded answer because I'm not an athlete or former athlete, but I just think the work is important.
Thank you, thank you. So now I'd like to open up the floor for questions. Dr. Gay, if you could just give.
Hi, I guess my question would be to about the cost. Because I hear that access to care sounds great for everybody that we're talking about, but because we're dealing with a male-dominated sport, what is the education around informing athletes what to recognize? Because again, most first episodes happen between 16 and 30, so we're all open up to access to care, being there as a safe space for them to come talk to us. Has there been any education platforms on educating them on what to look for bipolar and schizophrenia and any other mental health so they can recognize it early, so early intervention?
Erica just left out the back of the room. She's our director of player engagement. I will say I'm on the business side. That falls into the basketball side. I do know that there are programs that the NBA does, and you may know some of this too, in terms of throughout the season where they're talking to players about mental wellness, whether it's, and sometimes it's on financial literacy, it's on different topics. I don't know how in depth they go in terms of those conversations, because unfortunately I don't touch that piece of it. But I know that the resources are there. I couldn't give you more specificity. I apologize for that. But
And shameless plug, we are talking to the NBA about hopefully partnering, because Jewel Gooding, our executive director, has written curriculum around different trainings that we offer to people in the workplace, as well as athletes and entertainers, around understanding mental health, which kind of takes you through just understanding the different types of mental illnesses, how to find access to care, and how to have healthy ways to cope. Thank you for your question. Next question.
Hi everyone, my name is Leah Howard. I'm a former college athlete via Spelman College. And I've since dedicated my life to athlete mental health, being a professional counselor. And one of the common themes that I've seen, regardless of where someone is on the mental health continuum, is life after sports and that transition piece. And that's something I've seen my former teammates struggle with, and some of my clients that I've seen. And so I was wondering, for the professional athletes, what were some coping strategies that you all did that aided in your transition out of professional sports, or even some suggestions that you may have provided teammates with?
Great question, Jumaine.
Well, that's one of the major things that I do right now. I work with a lot of athletes, not only NBA guys, a lot of NFL guys. I provide a safe space for them, and I travel Africa, India. I go everywhere to give them that space, and some guys are not really open yet to have those conversations, but it's just good to have them in the room, to watch other athletes have that conversation. And I'm very transparent about talking about the things I went through. After the ball stopped bouncing for me, I went through a 3-year depression. I was at home every single day, not ready to face the fact that, you know, basketball was over with. And the NBA had a transitioning program, which was a 3-month program in New York. It took me 3 years to build up the courage to even ask for help. So one of those things, after going through that transitioning program in New York for 3 months, ran into a guy by the name of Vin Baker that really, you know, gave me so much life just about the little words that he told me. And he said, Jumaine, do you know what it took for us to make the NBA? And I was like, absolutely. And he was like, that stays with us. It never goes anywhere. You just got to find somewhere else to put it. And that's when my passion come out to help other athletes that's transitioning the way I did.
Thank you, that's awesome. You want to add anything to that?
It's funny to hear those answers. It's 32 teams in the NFL, and I was like, you trying to tell me not one of these teams want me to play again? And I'm sitting in my basement for at least 6 to 8 months by myself every day in the dark, not watching television. My mother would call me, don't answer the phone. And finally I had a really good friend of mine who just came over. He just came over and said, you know what, I'm at the gate, let me in, I don't care, let me in. And that opened the door for me to just start talking. And that was the first time I actually talked with someone and went and found someone I could talk to professionally. Because I couldn't understand why I just was not good enough to play football again. That didn't make sense to me. I understand now, I was old, but it just took a while.
This question is for the athletes that we have here. My name is Garrison Hurst. I wanted to ask, today we have a lot of like sports analysts. I know you gentlemen spoke earlier about the pressures of being a professional athlete, or the things that you all carry. We have a lot of sports analysts that are very critical of athletes, and sometimes those critiques can become more personal, just about the game. I just wanted to know, I know it's used as a tool to inspire athletes to work harder and do better, but I just want to know from your perspective if you think that that's more harmful than helpful to athletes, and what type of impact you think that has.
It's funny, man, because I build up this thing whenever I'm talking with the kids. I always tell them basketball is 70% mental. You know, you can have all the skill in the world, but if your mental's not together. But to answer your question, you know, I was built on hearing negativity, but everybody's not like me. You know, I left the University of Georgia after 2 years because the coach told me I'd be pumping gas after 10 years. So I took it amongst myself to leave when I never thought to leave the University of Georgia early. You know, but everybody's not like me. You know, like you said, I think it's bad. I think social media is bad. I think like the stuff that Westbrook is going through right now is bad. It's a lot of things that's bad, and I just think that we actually need to go out and do more. Like anytime I see stories like that, even watched a guy the other day from Miami that got on the panel and talk about things he's been through. I just think it's just more opportunity for us to get out and be able to have those conversations with those people that's going through it.
I'll deal, but I said something earlier about that. Again, it goes into that thing where mentally strong, mentally tough. Another thing you got to fight through in NBA, NFL. They're going to say what they're going to say. You can't stop it. I think now the harder thing they say about you, the better ratings they get. So I think, again, it comes back to guys and girls having someone to talk to help talk through the things that you're hearing about yourself, because they're not going to stop. It's been going on for too long, and now it's big business. So I think that's another process kids going to have to fight through, and that's going to be finding someone to talk to and open up those windows for you.
Can I just add something real quick? I was going to say, I agree with you in terms of now they have to have a persona, and the more you say, the ratings go up, and so now people are really picking. But I think just as people, we can have a level of compassion for the other person and like start to think about these athletes as people. As we said before, you don't know what's happening at home, off the court, off the field. We only know he missed that free throw, and I'm going to go in on him because he missed that free throw. Well, you don't know what happened before or what it took for him to get up to get to that free throw line. To your point about, I just kind of chuckled. He was like, I don't know True that. I'm sure there are days when they wake up and they're like, you know what? They got practice in the morning. They go home, they come back on game days. You might travel, you get in at 2, 3 in the morning. You got to get up the next day and do it all over again, rinse and repeat. And you do this for 82 games, and everybody's like, well, why didn't he make that shot? And they want to get on these shows and talk about folks and do all these things without thinking about what it took for them to even get up that day, to get to the arena, to get to that free throw line. So I hope we'll all have a little bit of compassion when we leave this room. Go Hawks.
Thank you for saying that too. I just want to add, because there are a lot of similarities again to the music industry. And so I won't say any names because I'm not trying to be a part of certain conversations on social media, but we see artists unraveling in front of our eyes on a daily, and people commenting, and the trolls making the comments, but we don't know, to your point, what the athletes or the musicians go through. I mean, we look up to them, we want to be them, we buy their music, we go see them play. And I was on the other side, on the music side, because I was the one who, maintained the schedule for the artists, set up dates and promos and interviews. And I was that girl like, come on, man, I know you just had a, ran out flight from Atlanta, but you got to press at 10 a.m. And they're like, I can't even have a chance to take a shower yet. But the labels, meanwhile, we're putting so much pressure in them now that you have social media, you got the fans, everybody has an opinion. And so, to your point, we all need more grace. We don't need sympathy. We do not need you to feel sorry for us, for the athletes, for the artists, but we do need more empathy for you to kind of just for 1 second try to put yourself in their shoes, or think about what the day in the life of an athlete is, or what a musician is. And even educators, parents, your mothers, your teachers or therapists, you trying to solve everybody else's problem, but meanwhile, y'all have stuff you're going through too. So if nothing else, when you leave this room, which is the reason why we had this conversation, is that we do all need to give each other more grace and create these safe spaces in our communities, in our homes, for our athletes, within our organizations. It's just super important.
I just want to add one piece to that. We're talking about the sportscasters and sports analysts for professional athletes, right? We now have this concept of NIL, name, image, and likeness, to now where high school students can be paid millions of dollars as soon as they step foot on the college campus to be able to perform at a high level, right? 17, 18 years old, 5-star recruit, $5, $10 million in the bank account, you have to go out there and perform. That pressure, they're not built for that. And there's no support system in place right now for them to be able to achieve that. So the fallout from that is going to be like the next, it's going to be like that next layer that we're going to be discussing 3, 5, 10 years from now. How NIL deals actually had an impact and impeded the progress of talented athletes, how this also had an impact on the collegiate sports. College football is really at risk right now because of the money that's being thrown at athletes right now. So this is another thing.
Thank you for mentioning that. That's a great point, which means we got to get to those kids before they get into the league. Come on, let's get this. Let's just set up some global programs for these young athletes, Andrea. Next question.
All right, we have our last 2 questions.
And this is one of our board members of Silence and Shame. So thank you, Lonnie, for being here today.
Thank you. I had a question. I'm looking from the
Jumaine.
athlete side as well as from the corporate side. I think you said each of the teams have a therapist or someone that's available. And I'm wondering from the athlete side, are they comfortable going to that person, not feeling like it's going to be used against them? And from a company side, have you thought about using like an EAP program like a lot of companies have, where it's a list of therapists you can go to, it's anonymous, and it never gets back to the employer as to what's going on?
So
do they trust you to know that your guy knows what to tell them?
Yeah, and so I should clarify too, the therapist that we have is not on staff for us, so they are independent and what is shared with them and the players, between them and the players. So it's not information that goes beyond that conversation. Now, they certainly have access to our EAP program as do our employees, but the league has made that available to them so that they don't have to navigate and find. They can certainly do that as well, and some of them may have their own therapist in addition to the one that is provided for them.
Well, in the fact that I'm in Philadelphia, NBA provides a lot of therapists as well. But general manager for the Philadelphia 76ers actually reached out to my organization to be able to come in and mentor and talk with the kids. But I partner with a group called Mindful Sport and Performance Wear that actually, because I always say that I'm not licensed, you know, a lot of people get out and I'm a big advocate of mental health, but I'm not licensed, so I do have to partner with the organization.
Yes.
So I do think it's big to be able to have, and also me doing work with Black Men Heal, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable working with different, you know, people like me. When I went off to college, you know, people wanted to go out to the University of Georgia. I wanted to play for a coach that looked like me. You know, Tubby Smith was at the University of Georgia at the time. A lot of people are like that about their therapists. You know, so I think, you know, when I spoke earlier, you know, I think it should be more open and more variety for the players to make that decision.
Thank you, Jumaine. Last question. And we love Ms. Laura Morse also. She is a licensed professional counselor and does a lot with silence and shame as well, so thank you.
So the first part is going to just be gratitude. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I felt like an MVP these last couple of years. You know, it's something that's always been important to me as a professional to talk about mental health, but I understand that not everybody's willing to hear and ready to hear. But I so appreciate this conversation. We have to talk about this. We have to normalize it, and so it won't be scary or overwhelming. Do it before you get into a crisis. So I just want to encourage you all to take this conversation to heart and understand that you actually are showing strength and your own fortitude if you take this initiative. But what I wanted to ask you all is how you find yourselves having these conversations with other people who are like, man, I just don't know. You know, maybe that's your issue. That's not my issue. And we all know we all have something, right? But how you kind of keep pushing through, even though you know that you're going to be met with some resistance. And I also wanted to ask too, real quickly, about the substance use and how we cope with certain things. And I know as athletes, when you're in pain, you know, you have the medications. You talk about my nephew. Just try to make sure you don't fall into these trappings.
As far as the coping situation, again, like you said, everyone's different. So people handle things different, but if you want to put everything into an umbrella, it comes back to conversation. You got to feel comfortable. And a lot of times, like I said, I had a friend just reach out to me and he was not accepting me anymore. And if you can catch it before that, if there are signs, hopefully someone will see it. But if that person is willing to speak with someone and talk to them like yourself, you know, that's the start. As far as I said something about, I guess, pain medicine, substance abuse. In the NFL, it was easy to become addicted to anything because we had jars full of everything we wanted because they just wanted you on the field. I would get a Toradol shot before every game. I could get my hamstring numb for 16 weeks straight just so I could play. Vicodin, Percocet, whatever, you know, it was like Skittles. But the thing is, that was the old NFL for sure. I know it's not like that now. I can't vouch on how guys are handling that inside the locker room right now. But they're really strong and really open conversations about those addictions that guys are having or guys had. So they put stop signs in the way of guys being able to abuse those medicines through the league. Not saying guys may not have a doctor friend that maybe help them out on the side. I don't know, but there are stop signs now that guys will not abuse those meds through the NFL locker room.
I'm real big on, you know, speaking my truth and the things that I've been through when I talk to people. Because when I look in the mirror, a lot of times when I was younger, before I was in a place where I am now, the thing that got me in trouble is looking in the mirror and not seeing the person that I am. Well, not knowing, you know, that I had an issue. And for me, I'm very observant of people. You know, I sit back and I watch people, and then I go up to people like, man, how are you doing? And they say, all right. I say, man, like, how are you doing? And then I say it again, and I ask them again, like, how are you doing? And then we'll sit and we'll have a conversation, and I start speaking about a lot of things that I've experienced. I think I've experienced so much in my life that there's nothing that I can, not talk about with people. And when I open up with that, you'll be surprised at how open people become once you start having that conversation with them. And I think I'm like 100% when I'm speaking with athletes and I talk about the things I've experienced, they start opening up. And once you can get them to start opening up and speaking about it, that's when the healing starts.
Thank you. Wow, I wish we had more time, but I want y'all to give it up for these incredible parents. I do want to thank the Silence and Shame staff in the back. If you could just raise your hand, Jewel Gooding, Andrea, just everybody for allowing us to create this safe space today. If you guys do post on social media from what you saw today, we hope you will utilize the hashtag Silence and Shame. Also, if you have any questions, Dr. Gay, like I mentioned, has his own private practice here. We have some Silence and Shame postcards, I think, in the back that we're going to distribute, which have resources. So you can follow us at Silence and Shame on Instagram, at SilenceTHShame on Facebook and Twitter, and check out our website, silenceandshame.com. We do have a resource tab, and we have a lot of other community conversations on our YouTube page at Silence and Shame TV. Again, enjoy the game today. It's Silence and Shame night at State Farm Arena, so let's keep ripping Silence and Shame. Let's take these conversations back into our families and our communities, and let's again remember to take time to save a life and silence and shame. Thank you.